record this. And then I will attempt to do the closed captioning. Okay, Lillian, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Mina. Are you able to hear me?
We can.
Mina and the leadership of ELPAK, my colleague teachers, I am privileged today to present to you a short talk on how we are supposed to be doing a multimodal instruction of reading comprehension. So kindly allow me to share my screen. And I will also request that you allow me turn off my camera.
Okay, you can go ahead.
No problem. And yes, you can see the captions because some people need to see it. So but they're not exactly right. Okay, go ahead, Lillian.
Just a moment. Are you able to see my screen?
No, it's just a black screen. It says that you're
Just a
sharing,
moment.
but we don't see anything. Now we do. Great.
Still not seeing anything?
Nope, we see it.
Now we can see.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I am Lilian Mandilla, and I'm privileged to share with you on enhancing learners' reading comprehension skills using multimodality. Before I go on, I believe it will be good for you to know me a little bit. I am a Kenyan by birth, and according to my educational experience, I have a bachelor's degree in education. I do teach English and literature, and I've been doing that for quite a while. I also did a professional development course in language and literacy in education. And it is this professional development that I learned so much about developing our learners' literacy skills, and one of them being the enhancement of reading comprehension. I have also engaged in various volunteering activities. It is my hope that at the end of this session, we are going to understand the importance of reading comprehension, the current situation of reading comprehension in Kenya, and why it is necessary for us to carry out a multimodal instruction of reading comprehension, and also how we are actually doing, we are supposed to be doing that multimodal instruction. And lastly, we'll have a conclusion. Multimodality and reading comprehension, it is important for us to understand the key terms that will be used in this presentation. The first one is reading comprehension, and throughout this presentation, it will refer to the understanding, interpretation, and evaluation of written text, while multimodality will refer to the combined utilization of a variety of semiotic resources. In this case, semiotic resources are modes, e.g. in communicative events and text. A short background. In Kenya, all of us are aware that the use and therefore the growth of English language is increasing day by day. English is being used as a national language, and also it is doubling up as an educational language. In educational cycles, it is being used for instruction, examination purposes, library purposes, because all teaching and learning materials are authored in English. And also it's being taught as a compulsory subject. And one most important aspect of the English language is reading comprehension. And because of the importance of English as a subject and also as importance of reading comprehension. Currently, all learners in fact, from the early years up to the high school levels. So it is therefore expected that because of these extensive exposure of learners to reading comprehension, they're supposed to be possessing top-notch reading comprehension skills, but that is not the case right now. Learners have continued to exhibit a deficiency in reading comprehension skills, and these can be seen which normally tests reading comprehension skills. In fact, according to a NEC report of 2019, it indicated that despite the examination testing skills in a balanced manner and pitched at the right level of learners, and the analysis of the candidates' work revealed poor comprehension skills. This trend, if allowed to continue, reading comprehension is not just an educational aspect, but it is also a survival skill because we depend on it in our personal lives and also professional lives. I'm sure there are so many things that we've been able to do as professionals because of our ability to comprehend the texts that are presented to us. In our personal lives, we have had to deal with maybe doctor's prescriptions. And for us to be able to do that, we have had to have very good comprehension skills. If we can go back, we can remember a story of Kenyan nurses who failed an English test. I want to assume that maybe there was a problem with reading comprehension skills. So comprehension is a survival skill. So if this trend continues like this, we are scared that are not going to contribute meaningfully in the development of the society, as opinioned by the UNESCO report of 2020. This therefore calls for us to come up with instructional strategies that will ensure that learners get deep reading comprehension skills. Researchers in the reading area have said that reading comprehension is a complex. Multiple teaching strategies have to be employed. That is why I carried out this study to see now how these multiple strategies could be used in the teaching of reading comprehension. The guiding question was how I could use multimodality to teach reading comprehension skills. According to literature, learners are supposed to be given knowledge, and the constructed knowledge is based on two ideas. The first one is the fact that constructed learners' prior knowledge influences the acquisition of new knowledge. And secondly, learning is an active process. And if learning is an active process, it means that a constructive environment should be able to attain is use of multiple means of representation. For a teacher to be able to use multiple means of representation, they have to adopt an appropriate approach. There is an approach of teaching and learning called the Universal Design of Learning approach, propagated by Myers and Ross. It is based on three principles of multiple representations, multiple engagement. Learners are different in nature and therefore they have to be given multiple opportunities for them to learn. It is on these bases that the study on multimodality situates itself, because multimodality allows the use of multiple means of representation, engagement, and expression. Multimodality has been seen to improve as well as enhancing their comprehension skills. When you're using multimodality, there are certain factors that you're supposed to be putting into consideration. The first one is the issue of the social context. It has to be an appropriate one. You should be able to have the modes that you'll be using in the teaching and learning process, have modal affordance, as in when you're having those modes, they should have a possibility of creating the impact that you want to have. Then you should have the urgency as a teacher, then the availability of technology. So in this study, I found out that it was possible to use multimodality in the teaching and learning of reading comprehension. For so long, I was struggling with the teaching of reading comprehension because if I recall my experience as a student and also as a teacher trainee, there is no instruction of reading comprehension. So I have, for so long, I have ended up teaching my learners the same way I saw my teachers teaching me, because in college, nobody taught me reading comprehension. Looking at the syllabus, 4 aspects of reading comprehension have to be taught. The first one is recall. We have comprehension, application, and analysis, and the other one is the issue of the context. I decided to focus on these 3 key areas because that is where I saw a problem with the learners. So to teach recall, I used a strategy called a story map. A story map is basically a sketch of main events or ideas in a given story. And when you use it, you just have a sketch. Learners read the story and they fill in the recall abilities. You can have, we have several types of or formats of story maps. You can have a story map that is just having, let's say, a beginning, the middle, and the end. So in this case, a learner explains what is happening at the middle of the beginning of the story, middle, and the end. You can have another one that is having maybe the characters, characterization, having certain themes, having the setting. So such like sketches for learners to enhance their comprehension. This was used because it improves recall and comprehension abilities. For reading comprehension, I also used another strategy called an interactive flipbook. This one is an ebook, videos, audios on the same interface, as the same as reading a comprehension passage. They can be able to watch what the passage is saying. They can see pictures of what is being talked about and at the same time read words. So this particular strategy deepens learners' understanding. And also to enhance their application and analysis, I used dramatization. This is not a new strategy. It is always there. I used dramatization, and this one I borrowed from the live performance. Was used in such a way that learners were given a passage to read. Then after the reading, I gave them an aspect of the passage that they were to enact and bring it out the way it had been presented in the passage. And dramatization is said to enhance holistic learning, self-expression, as posited by Nazarai. These methodologies or modes and increased learners' motivation and engagement. And this was seen in the use of dramatization and the interactive flipbook. Also, the methods enhanced learner autonomy. Use of dramatization allowed learners to use their own language in enacting the given task. And also, learner autonomy was seen when learners were giving their perceptions and views of how autonomy was also seen when learners were given an opportunity to create their own interactive flipbook. It enhanced reading comprehension skills. At the end of this exercise, learners said that they had really enjoyed reading comprehension passages, and the way the understanding was a bit easier compared to the way they had been taught. Use of multimodality also enhanced reading comprehension well using dramatization. Self-discovery for me as a teacher, because I had never taught reading comprehension using dramatization, interactive, story maps. So this me led to in gel focus on enhancing learners story dramatization, and in as much as it was possible to use these methods to teach reading comprehension, it was also discovered that as instruction of reading comprehension, because in most cases, rarely do we employ multiple strategies in the teaching of reading comprehension. And this is because maybe we were not even taught how we are supposed to be teaching that reading comprehension. And this means that our in-service trainings and pre-service training should focus on teaching teachers how to teach reading comprehension. So thank you so much for listening, and ELPAK, thank you for the opportunity.
That was great. Thank you. I think we have like a couple minutes. If anybody has any questions for Lilian, I think we can take a couple questions. And while people are thinking of their questions, I just want to say I really enjoyed that because it touched on a lot of themes that we've been talking about. So these activities that you're talking about are very learner-centered. They provide scaffolding for the learners. They promote autonomy, which is something we've been talking about, helping learners to do self-discovery, which was related to what we talked about last week. So I really liked that. That was great. And I was happy the closed captioning turned on, although it turned off at the end.
Yeah, so I just think we should continue, because I'm not seeing any questions coming or any hands being raised. But it was a great presentation. Well done.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay, there's a question, Caro. Caro, you can continue.
Okay, I just wanted to request Lilian if it is possible for her to share the presentation slides, maybe in the group, so that some of us can actually follow up slowly later on. Is it possible, please?
I will, Caroline, no worries, thank you.
Okay.
Great idea. Yeah, there's a lot of concepts in there and research in there that I think would be valuable to spend a little time looking back over. Good idea, Caroline. All right, unless there's any other questions or comments, we're going to move to the next phase of tonight's session. Unless, Austin, do you want to take this time now to say some things, or would you prefer to wait to the end?
No, just continue. But there's a question from Juma.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Jumas.
Thank you, Mina. I don't want to ask a question, but I want to give a comment. First of all, that the points that Lilian has presented to us are very valid, very workable. They're things that can help us enhance our comprehension skills. I tend to feel that the problem is with our education system in such a way that, one, what Lilian talks about is very viable, and sometimes we apply it during our literature classes. It can work with literature. But the problem that NEC presents in the comprehension, we don't know which passage is coming. So we can just teach comprehension in a way to prepare the students in case they come across it in exams, then what can they do about it? So we train them in preparation for exams, so that even if we reuse the story map, we'll use the interactive flip book, whatever, the dramatization, it only helps them to relate to it during exams when they're seated quietly in the exam room with their papers. But the comprehension that comes is not the one we handle in class. So probably what we can take home is that these skills, we can use them to help students enhance their memory, their motivation, their participation, their engagement in preparation for the real activity during the exams. Thank you.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, and actually, I think that kind of relates to what we'll be talking about next, which is assessment. But you're right, we can't necessarily be preparing them directly for what's to come, but we can be building those skills and some of those things you mentioned, increasing motivation and engagement, so that while students are in class, they're actually learning. And that's something that can prepare them for the exam, rather than students who are bored and disengaged from the lessons, and so really aren't making any progress. But I think the other good point you made, Jimas, is as teachers, we do everything we can to make learning more effective and beneficial for our students, but there are things outside our control related to administrative issues, for sure.
Mina, I can go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Austin Oduor. I'm the Secretary for English Language Professional Association of Kenya. I know there's quite a number of us who are joining for the first time. We welcome you, and we'll continue sharing more about English Language Professional Association. Now, because of time, I'll just go direct to the reason why I wanted to communicate to the whole team, is that we have been having these sessions for the last 1 month. Actually, we call them Virtual English Language Fellow, because we are here with Mina, who has been sponsored by the United States Embassy, United States Education Department, you know, and she's here to represent them. And also, she's also part of Regional English Language Office, which operates in 14 countries in East and Central Africa. So given that we have been having these sessions, it's also important for us to be able to understand if these sessions are helping us. So what we are going to do today is that after this session, I'm going to send out a Google form. Actually, I'll post it in the group. I'll post it today and tomorrow and on Thursday. So you need to fill in your details, and you need to let us know how you feel about these sessions. So I just thought I should let you know. And then for those who have joined us for the first time, I just shared a text message, a chat, that you can reach out through my number there, so that we can be able to bring you into the whole team, so you understand what we do, you know, and also the kind of opportunities that we have here within the English Language Professional Association of Kenya. So thank you very much, and over to you, Mina.
Great, thank you. Yes, I encourage everyone to fill out this form. It's helpful for ELPAK and also helpful for me in terms of future sessions, planning for those, the content of those sessions. All right, without further ado, let's move on to assessment. As I mentioned, we will have assessment for the topic for the next several sessions. And so tonight we're just kind of laying a foundation. that we'll be building off of. So tonight we'll be looking at the purposes of assessment and the principles of assessment. And we'll be looking at some key terms that will be important in the next couple of weeks. We have been filming this. This has been recorded this whole time. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want your image used, you can just keep your phone off or your camera off. Not your phone. You should have your phone on so you can see us. All right. So in the session tonight, we'll be looking at the purposes of assessment. We'll be looking at the principles of assessment and also how we can evaluate an assessment based on these principles. So we'll be applying what we learn here. I also just want to apologize. We're supposed to be having the captions, but they don't seem to be working. They were working. Okay, maybe now. All right, before we go any further, I do have a question for you all. Actually, I have two questions for you all. Again, you know I like to get some background information before we move on. So I have two questions for you in the poll here. They're both related to assessment. The first question, you can only choose one answer. Who decides when to give assessments and what type to give? So does the administration choose, the teachers? Do both teachers and administration choose, or is there someone else involved? You can only choose one. Question number two, who makes the quizzes and the tests? And you can answer multiple answers for this. So we have teachers, administration, government, and other. So I'll give you about a minute to go ahead and do the poll. And this will just help me kind of understand your situation here. And let's see, it looks like about 70% of you have answered. I'm going to give this 5 more seconds. Oh, this is the best poll yet. 90% of you have completed the poll. I usually get about 60% of you completing the poll. We have some interesting answers. Let's have a look. Okay, so who decides? Okay, so both teachers and administrators generally decide about when to give assessments and what type. Sometimes the administration is making the decision, sometimes the teachers, but generally both have a say. And the teachers are making most of the tests, but it looks like you do have some tests that are required by the government, administration, and others. Okay, this is similar, I think, to the US. Generally, teachers make these decisions themselves. They have some guidance from the administration about when to give assessments and what type. And then in terms of tests and quizzes, usually teachers make them themselves or they come from books and curriculum, but we do have like national tests and things like that. And I believe you have those as well. Okay, great. Okay, moving on. So before we get too deep into it, I just want to clarify what assessment is. So I have a true false question here. You can answer in the chat, true or false. Testing and assessment are the same thing. They are synonyms. 2 words for the same thing. Is this true or false? Please answer in the chat. All right, Nancy's quick to jump in there. What do other people think? Is this true or false? Lillian's also jumping in.
False.
Was that a false I just heard?
False.
False. Okay, I have a verbal false. Thank you. Great. I've got
False.
another verbal false. Great. I've got Leonard, Carolyn, Nancy M, Jeffrey, Lydia, Seth, all chiming in with false. Nobody says it's true.
False.
All right. Okay, I think, that's a very, very fair thing to say, Stephen. Not sure. That is very fair. I appreciate your honesty there. Okay, the answer is it is false. But there are many people who think that testing and assessment are the same thing. And I will say that in conversation, we often use these words synonymously, meaning when we're just talking, not in a professional sense, but just kind of conversationally, we often use them to mean the same thing. And so if you said true, you're not necessarily wrong. And if you said you're not sure, that is very fair. When we're talking technically as teachers, if we were talking about curriculum, policy, things like that, then they are two separate things, but they have a close relationship. So let's look at that. So this is kind of a nice visualization, I think, of testing and assessment. Lorraine says quite different terms. Good. So we see here that teaching is the big circle. And within teaching, we have assessment. And we can see also, I like this image because assessment is a very large part of teaching. I think it's something that we often don't think about how much assessment is done as part of our jobs. But within assessment, we see tests. So tests are a category of assessment. They are a type of assessment. We might refer to tests as formal assessment. Quizzes and tests, exams are all considered formal assessment where we're giving a grade, we're recording the grade. And we'll be talking about that more in a future session. So just to give you kind of definitions from the literature. So Brown, who wrote a great book on assessment principles, says that tests are prepared administrative procedures. So they have to do with administration. And they happen at identifiable times in a curriculum. So we don't just suddenly say, hey, let's have a test. Usually when we plan our semester or sessions, we plan when we're going to have these kind of tests. And usually we let our learners know ahead of time that they're going to have a test so that they can study, or as Brown says, that they can muster all of their faculties to offer peak performance. So they're really trying to do their best on these because they know that we are grading and we're writing their grade in some kind of book, it's being recorded, and that it could have a potential effect on their future. Assessment, on the other hand, is an ongoing process. So Brown gives us a very vague general definition of assessment, and that is because assessment is many things. So when we think again about these purposes of assessment or the objectives, what's our goal with assessment? We have this nice quote here that language assessment is much more than simply giving a language test. It's the entire process of test use. Indeed, the ultimate goal of language assessment is to use tests to better inform us on the decisions we make and the actions we take in language education. So I like this, this quote for many reasons. It deals specifically with the language classroom. So like the English language classroom. And I just think it gives us some perspective here. So looking deeper at this quote, we see that it's still, we're talking about assessment, but it's still focusing on the test, because whether we like it or not, we know that the test is always in the back of students' mind. We can be doing fun activities. They can be building their knowledge, engaging, using critical thinking. But in the end, what really matters to the administration, what matters often to students, what matters to their parents, is the test. And do students pass the test or not? I think this kind of goes back also earlier to what Jimas was saying, that we're doing all this stuff, but what about the test at the end? So assessment is geared to the test. and kind of works around it. It helps us to make other decisions. So what do we test? We teach many things during a semester or a year of classes, and we can't test all of it. So what do we test as part of it? How do we prepare students for the test? So as we're teaching the material, are we teaching it the same way we would test them? Are we doing other types of assessments that prepare them for the test? Then when it comes to the actual test itself, how do we test? Are we using multiple choice tests, gap fills? Are we using essay exams, speaking exams, or some other type of assessment? And then finally, and possibly most importantly, and this is something we often forget about, what do we do with the results of these tests? Often, I know as a student, I was only thinking about the test, and once the test was done, I had moved on. And then I noticed when I first started teaching, I had that same attitude. Okay, the test is over. Okay, we're done with that. Maybe we're starting over or something like that. But actually, the tests give us a lot of information and can tell us a lot about what to do in the future, what our students need, and things like that. And that's something we'll be looking at in more detail in the future. Okay, looking closer. The objectives of assessment or the purposes of assessment. When we're looking at these two things, we often break them into two categories. Yes, thank you, Lilian. Tests are informative. Yeah, they're not just about a grade. We can gather a lot of information about what our students have learned, their strengths, their weaknesses, and actually we can learn about our teaching from that as well. If all the students do poorly on a certain part or certain topic in the test, it may be because we as teachers didn't present it in the best way. All right, so we have assessment of learning. So assessment of learning is kind of basically what we're talking about with tests. So after we have taught something, we want to check and see if students have learned. So this could be a test. It could also be at the end of class where you do some kind of summary and you check to see what your students have learned. Maybe you have them do some kind of reflection, feedback, exit ticket. This can be an assessment of learning to see what they have learned. We also do assessments for learning. And these assessments for learning are different things we do to kind of figure out where our students are, what they need, what their strengths and weaknesses are. Sometimes assessment of learning and assessment for learning can be the same activity or the same exercise, and we can use it in both ways. Sometimes they're completely separate. But another way for us to look at this, assessment for learning, for those of you who cook. Assessment for learning is when we are cooking something and we taste it to see if it's ready, to see if it's finished. So maybe you're cooking, I don't know, some beans or some stew or something, and you taste it and you say, it needs a little salt. And then you taste it again. Oh, it needs a little of this. And so you're tasting to decide if it's ready or not and what is needed. And this is the same thing, assessment for learning. You are assessing to see what is still needed. Are the students ready? What is going to happen next? Assessment of learning, this is kind of the final thing. This is when you bring the food to the table and people decide, is it delicious or not? There's no chance to change the dish now. We are assessing the final product. And so this would be something like a test, a quiz, or even an exit ticket. The class is over, the lesson has been taught, maybe the semester is over. We find out if the test or the dish was successful, but we really can't change anything at this point. Any questions before I move on? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So a little bit want to maybe to bring more clarity on both off and for. It seems like they're harder to differentiate.
We are going to be looking more at how to differentiate, and yes, and also how to bring better quality. You're doing a good job, Lauren, of anticipating where I'm going with this.
Thank you.
All right, so looking a little closer, we have assessment of learning. So here are some statements that are true about this. The purpose of assessment of learning is to measure and document progress. We can measure the effectiveness of instruction to see if the teacher has done a good job. We can provide grades. We can provide information for the administration. So we can, if the administration is asking, okay, who are the strong students in here? Who are the weak students in here? Through this kind of this assessment, we can answer those things. We can also provide information, for example, to the government. So they want to know in your school, is the school performing well or not? Are the students performing well? Or for organizations. So if for example, the UN is providing money for an education project and they want to know, is learning actually happening? Is the money being well spent? Then this is what we're looking for. And it's possible that sometimes this assessment of learning can motivate students because they see the end result of it. Does anyone want to try to give me an example of something that is an assessment of learning? I mentioned a couple earlier. What do we do in our classes that would be an example of assessment of learning? Go ahead, Jumas.
The tests we do in class and the summative exams at the end of the course.
Yes, that is a perfect example. Tests and summative exams, right? The purpose is to measure and document the project, provide grades, all of these things. And for many students, this is motivating, although not for all. Good. Does anybody else have an example? I think that was the main example. Go ahead, Josiah.
What about
I'm not sure what you said. Your microphone is cutting out. Can you repeat what you said? Maybe try typing it into the chat. Because I could not understand it. It was doing that thing where it's breaking up your words. Yes, rubrics are often used with this type of learning, Caroline, because we often see them used with kind of tests, summative assessments and things like that. Yes, you are absolutely right that those would go along with it. And that would be a tool that we would use with assessment of learning. Excellent. Good. All right, I'm going to move on. All right, and then when we look at assessment for learning, so some purposes here are to be able to group students by their abilities or needs, to plan our instruction or plan our lessons, to provide feedback to our students, definitely to motivate them, to be able to diagnose their strengths and weaknesses, and also to prepare them for those tests like the final exam and summative exam. So this is part of the purpose. Can you think of any examples of these things? Something that we do in class for these purposes.
Maybe a poll.
Sorry, go ahead.
Saying the poll. Poll can be used for that. Like the poll.
A poll, yes, a poll could be used for that. Very good. Kind of asking students, did you understand this? Do you need to do more with this? Yeah, that's a great example. Very good. Good. Anyone else have examples? Go ahead again. Okay, and I see earlier Josiah was talking about term papers. Yes, definitely. A term paper is a form of summative assessment. Yes, we don't often call them tests, but essentially a term paper is a test. It's checking to see, did the students learn? What can they do? And now we're going to give it a grade. You're absolutely right. Good. Anyone else have examples for assessment for learning? Poll is a great example. I will tell you that pretty much everything else that you do in the classroom can be used as assessment for learning. The questions your students answer, so when you ask your students questions, the way they answer, that is a way of assessing. Good. Evaluation forms. Good, Nancy. So you might give out some form. You might play a game with your students, and that game can give you some information. Go ahead, Josiah.
I was also asking about questionnaires. I think whereby you can design questions that you want to know. Something.
I caught the word questions and something you want to know. So maybe asking students questions, or maybe they ask you questions, the things they want to know.
About the work you're coming up with. Initially, I was talking about, I hope you can hear me.
Sorry, Josiah, it was really hard to understand because of the sound cutting in and out. But I think you're talking about questions.
Sorry, I'm saying.
Go ahead.
About questionnaires and then the papers which are given at the end about two things.
A questionnaire.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, I got the word questionnaire. Yes, excellent. And
yes.
Excellent. Using that questionnaire to determine what they understand and don't. Good. Thank you. Thanks for persevering.
Okay.
Good. And Lilian has added to the chat, asking them to analyze a video or audio on a given concept, discussing and presenting, all of those things. Having students do a skit, having students do some of the things that Lilian was talking about. So making a story map, a flip book, having them role play something. These are all things that give you information that help you to know your students' abilities, their needs, what to do in future lessons, what kind of feedback to give. These things are motivating for students because they're involved in them. You can use them to diagnose strengths and weaknesses. And they actually are preparing students for these high stakes testing, even if they're not directly talking about those things on the test. And so I think that that's why in the previous image here, I'm just going to go back to it for a second, even though it will take forever, I apologize. Assessment is a huge part of what we do as teaching. Even if you don't realize it, you are often assessing your students. Every time you notice that a student can do something or a student can't do something, or you notice that an activity went well or an activity didn't do well, you are actually assessing for learning. Even if you don't write it down, even if you don't realize that it informs a future decision, that is all part of that. All right, so moving on to the principles of assessment. This is based on what Brown tells us in his book, Language Assessment Principles and Classroom Practices. At the end of this presentation, I have a link for the PDF. I find it to be a very organized, actually more interesting book than I thought it would be. I had to teach a course in university on assessment. And so I used this as the text. And at first I thought it would be very boring, but actually I didn't think it was. So our principles are practicality, reliability, validity, authenticity, washback, and something that was added in later editions is transparency. So we're going to look at these. So practicality, we see this word practical in here. I think many of you are familiar with this word. So when we're thinking about the practicality of a test or assessment, and before we go further, I will tell you that these principles of assessment, they do relate to all types of assessment, but I think they're often easiest to understand talking about a test. So for most of the rest of this presentation, I'll be talking about tests and kind of graded assignments. And then in our next session, we'll be looking more at formative assessment or those, the other type of assessment we do that is not linked to grades. But I just think it's easiest to understand assessment principles in terms of kind of formal graded assignments. All right, so when we're talking about practicality, we have some considerations. So for example, what is the cost of the test? If you make the test, it's free. Or if it's at the back of your textbook, it's free. But there are many tests out there that you have to pay for. So if you're ever Googling something, you need a test for something, you find the perfect test, and then you realize, oh, I have to pay for that. So then that's not so practical. You cannot buy all of your tests. How much time will it take to make the test? So if you make it yourself, is it going to take a long time? And how much time will it take to give the test? Is this going to be 10 minutes? Is this going to be 2 hours? What is practical? How easy or difficult will it be to administer the test? Is the test a piece of paper that you can just pass out and students can just easily answer with a pen and pencil? Or if we have something like a speaking test requires you to listen to individual students. Or if you're going to have, I don't know, skits or dialogues that students perform, that's going to be more complicated than just a written test. And then finally, the thing that I think many of us think about, how long will it take to correct and score the test? If it's multiple choice, easy, no problem. If it's an essay test, that's completely different. So these are all things we have to think about. So basically, when we're talking about practicality, we're looking for a test that is easy to design, easy to administer, and easy to score. If it's all of these things, we say it has high practicality. Now, I want you to understand this does not mean that it is a good test. Actually, there are many bad tests that are easy to score, easy to administer. For example, if I give a true-false test with 10 questions, pretty easy to make, easy to give, easy to score, but just having students answer true-false question probably isn't the best way if that's the only thing I do. So, but it does mean the test has high practicality. So when we're talking about this, we talk about high and low. So I'd like you to take a moment and consider these two examples. We have two examples of tests. The first test is a grammar test. We have 30 students. There are 50 multiple choice questions, and the test will be corrected by a Scantron. So you see the picture there where you fill in the bubbles with a pencil, and then the teacher or administrator takes that piece of paper and puts it in a machine, and the score comes out like that. The second example is also a grammar test with 30 students, but this is going to be a 15-minute recorded interview. And 3 different teachers will rate the speaker, and then they will compare their scores. Which of these has high practicality? You can answer in the chat. Grammar test 1 or grammar test 2? Which one has high practicality? I see a lot of people jumping in there. Test 1, task 1. I'll give a couple more seconds to answer. Irene says test 1. Seth agrees. Yes, and I agree with what you have said. The first one has high practicality. Lydia, Rabina, Paul all agree. It's easy to give. Maybe it was easy to make. It probably was made by someone else, so we don't have to really worry about it. And then easy to correct. You just put it into a machine. The second one has low practicality. It does not mean that the first test is a better test, but it does have high practicality. The second test would take a long time to, well, first it might be a little tricky to create, although maybe not so much. You just need some interview questions. But giving the test would take a long time, each student 15 minutes. And then to correct it, all three teachers have to talk about each one and agree. Ugh, that would take a long time. Our next principle is reliability. I think you know this word reliable, something that we can trust, something we can depend on. So a reliable test is consistent and it is dependable. So it means it is going to give us the same kind of answers every time. Another way to look at this is similarly capable students will achieve similar results. So if we have two students up here, they will have similar results on the test. If we have two students who are on the same level, but one scores high and one scores low, then we have an issue with reliability. Reliability is broken up into 4 sections. So one is student reliability. So sometimes these two students are the same, but maybe this student had a headache and came to class with a headache. And so the reason for the lower score is the headache. It has nothing to do with the test. It has nothing to do with you. It's something with the student. Rater reliability is the next thing. So if we have, actually a couple ways we can look at this. Maybe you have had this happen. If you're in a really good mood, maybe you have a group of tests and all of those students, oh, that answer's good. Oh, good job, good job. And then maybe you get a phone call and you get some bad news. You go back to correcting the tests and, oh, this is terrible. Oh, I don't even understand this answer. So your mood may affect how you're doing the test. This can also be an issue if maybe we don't like that student, or we really do like a certain student. We really like a certain student and we see, oh, their answer's not quite right, but I see what they mean. Whereas a student that maybe we've had a bad experience with, we say, oh, no, this student isn't even trying. We're humans, we are not robots, and sometimes this happens. Test administration reliability is more of a kind of an environmental thing. So if there's loud noise during the test, or there's loud noise on one side of the room, but not the other, or maybe there aren't enough desks. So maybe some students are sitting at a desk, but others have the papers in their laps and they're having trouble writing. These can all be issues with test administration reliability. And then finally, we have the actual reliability of the test. So there's different issues we can have with the test. So maybe there's some unclear questions. So certain students, if they see an unclear question, they'll just, this doesn't really, I don't understand. Oh, well, I'll choose this answer. Other students may look at an unclear question and start to worry and panic and get stuck. And maybe as a result, they won't do well on the rest of the test. So these are all factors to consider. All right, so I have some situations for you to consider now. So first one is related to student reliability. 2 students with similar abilities take the same test. One student has a terrible stomachache. Second situation, a teacher has 20 essays to correct. She corrects half in the morning before classes. After 5 lessons, cooking dinner, putting her children to bed, she corrects the other 10. So this would be rater reliability. The next one is the environmental reliability. During a listening exam, some students are seated near an open window. There is a lot of traffic noise outside. And the fourth is related to test reliability. Circle the correct answer. Yesterday, I And you might notice there's actually no correct answer there. Some of these things we can control. Some of them are out of our control. If they happen, there's nothing we can do. I have put this image into the WhatsApp group. So if you look in your WhatsApp chat, you'll see this image, or you can take a screenshot here. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and you're going to discuss these 4 situations. Which of them can we control? And if we can control them, how can we control them? I'm going to just give about 3 minutes because of time. I'll give 4 minutes. Okay. And also, I noticed that when we go to breakout rooms, most of you go and some of you are having trouble. When I open the breakout rooms, especially if you're using your phone, you'll get a message that looks like this. All you need to do is click on the join button and it will automatically take you to your breakout room. When you get to your breakout room, you'll need to unmute yourself so that others can hear you speak. And you don't need to worry about leaving the breakout room. It will automatically, when the time is up, it will automatically kick you out of the room. If you are stuck and you can't get into your room, let me know. Also, I'm not always in the main room. Sometimes I'm visiting different rooms. So if you are saying, Mina, help me, and I'm not there, it's because I'm in another room and I'll be back shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms. Please do join your room, because when you don't join the rooms, then sometimes one person ends up all alone and it's no fun. So you have 3 minutes, 4 minutes to look at these 4 situations and decide which ones you can control and what you can do to control them.
Yes, the task that she has just said.
Hi, how's it going in here?
Hi. Yeah, fine, Mina.
Do you need any help or anything?
Of course we need, yes. You said you are sending the task on the WhatsApp.
It's already in there. I sent it before class started.
Okay. Okay, fine. Okay.
Okay. All
So
right,
I think if that the task will continue without you.
Okay, and just
you can still remain with us. You can still remain with us anyway.
Thank you. Here, I'll just show it's the one that looks like this. So there should be 3 photos in the WhatsApp group, and it's the one that looks like this.
Yes, I've seen it.
Okay, I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think everybody's coming back from breakout rooms. Looks like we have everybody back. All right. I don't want to take too long with this, but I'm curious what you all discussed. You can feel free to share in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand and tell us what your group discussed, I'd love to hear it. Also, I found a button that said share to groups. At the end, were you able to see this slide in your breakout rooms? No, okay.
Yes.
Oh, you were? Okay, great. It's a new feature, or one that I newly discovered in Zoom. Very helpful. So which of these situations can we control the issue of reliability? Oh, I see some hands up. Go ahead, Christine.
Hi.
Hi.
I was in group 3, and we thought that we could control the first 3 situations. The first situation where a student has one of the students has a terrible stomachache, we could just administer medicine and give proper treatment and wait until the student feels better before we can give the test. Number 2, during a listening exam, some students are seated near an open window and there's a lot of traffic noise outside. We could either close the window or better move the students away from the window or even better still, we could just move them to a different room where the noise is minimum. About the teacher marking 20 essays, we decided that the teacher should look for a time where he has enough stretch to mark all the essays when he is fresh, he or she is fresh and has no other disruptions and situations that could interfere with the mood. Now about circle the correct answer, we were not very sure what that was. So we didn't do much about it.
Okay, that's very fair. Thank you. Thanks very much. Stephen, do you agree, disagree? What do you want to add to what Christine said?
No. I think I concur with her.
Okay. And Josiah?
I concur with her. And about the answer, the question, there is no answer because the sentence is in the past tense. Basically, she has said, she put it so correctly because you can administer, you can look for treatment for the student or maybe postpone. Second one, you closing the window. Then for the teacher, the last part, the teacher should settle down, finish everything, then do the marking when she is settled.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so it sounds like you agree with Christine. Good. And Amali Joel, go ahead. I think you're still muted. Go ahead and unmute. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Now, as I'm saying that I am in agreement with Christine on the first three answers. However, the last answer, I don't think if there is any correct answer in the answers that you gave us, because it's talking about a past activity. So I don't know if I'm thinking the wrong thing or maybe you asked a different thing.
No, you're absolutely right. So in this situation, there's a question on the test that has no correct answer.
There's no correct answer because it's talking about a past activity. So I was wondering, I thought the correct answer should have been yesterday I went, something like.
Yes, you're right, but that answer is not there. So I don't know if this has ever happened to you. It has happened to me.
Yes, it has.
Good. Nancy, do you want to add to that, or Jumas?
Yes, I do have something to add on the last question. Because you asked us what we can do to control it, would it be all right then to give a free mark to all the students because there's no right answer?
That would be one way to handle it. Yes, that would be a perfectly fine way. Very good. And Jumas, do you want to add any to that?
Yeah, on the last question, I tend to feel that the level of the grammar is not for high school students, but at least for those who have gone beyond high school, who know that sometimes we use the simple present tense to relate to a past experience to enliven it as if it is happening at that time, then it can be possible for that situation. But for high school students, it would be tricky.
Yeah, and I would say generally, I think that wouldn't be a good thing to test because, yeah, it would need more context to determine that that's the right way to do it. But yeah, that's another way to think of it. Yeah, so I agree with everything you guys said. I agree with this. If you run into a situation like this with the fourth one, hopefully noticing it first and making like an announcement to students that just go ahead and circle any answer. Don't worry about it. There's no correct answer. Because some students will spend the rest of the test on this question because they feel like they don't know the answer. Well, there is no answer. It's a bad question, right? If this is a test that we make as a teacher, we want to make sure to edit our work also so this doesn't happen. Both situations have happened to me. I have made tests like this, but I've also received tests from books and things like that that had mistakes in them. So we want to keep an eye out for those things. Great, you guys did a great job with that. All right, moving on. Oh, we're running out of time. All right, so validity is something else we have to think about. So the word valid, meaning real, true. We have two types of validity. First is content validity. Does the test actually measure, does it actually test what we think it should test, what we want it to test? And then face validity. How does the test appear to the test taker? So this question is related to content validity. So we have two tests here for listening comprehension. The first one is an oral dictation. So the teacher says some sentences, the students write down. How valid is that for listening comprehension? The second listening comprehension test, we have some oral questions. For example, what day is today? What color is the sky? And students should write down short answers. Which of these two examples has high validity, meaning it measures what we want it to measure? You can answer in the chat. In the interest of time, we'll just use the chat. So oral dictation or oral questions, which one is actually measuring listening comprehension? All right, well, Lilian says the second one. Josiah is agreeing with Lilian. Juma says oral questions. Nancy says not sure, and that's very fair. Stephen says the second. Oh, I just gave the answer away. Paul, go ahead. We have time for a quick something. Go ahead. I see you have your hand up. But now it is down. Okay. Okay, Nancy makes a good point. Both, but the second one measures both writing and listening. Josiah says, but aren't they both for listening anyway? So yes, Nancy and Josiah, you have two very good points. The first one, listening comprehension with oral dictation, does measure listening, but it does not measure comprehension. For example, if you were to dictate to me in Swahili, I could probably write down my sentences mostly correctly. I would probably have some spelling mistakes, but I think it would be not so bad. It doesn't mean that I understand what I wrote down. It means that I could relate the words, the sounds of the words to the writing. And so that does not measure listening comprehension. Nancy, you did make a good point. The second one does measure listening comprehension, but it does also measure writing ability too. So we would want to be really careful with that. If we truly want to measure their listening, then we're not going to take points off for spelling. We're going to make sure to have short written answers. For example, what color is the sky? And they write blue. That's fine. If you say what color is the sky and they say yes, then they definitely did not understand the question. Stephen, go ahead. I see your hand is up, but I can't hear you.
No, I think it's an error. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. All right, moving on. So the first one has low validity and the second one has high validity. All right, this has to do with face validity. And you can just kind of look at these two tests and imagine you gave these two tests to your students. Which one looks like a test? The first or the second? One of them has high face validity the other has low face validity. Nancy M says second. The second one has high face validity. Lydia and Angela both agree. And Jeffrey agrees as well. Yes, if you give this first one to students, they may very well do it, but it's hard for them to take seriously. It doesn't look very professional. It doesn't really look like the teacher prepared or put much effort into the test. The second one is typed out, it's clear, it has high face validity. So this is something also to consider. Very good. Next, we have authenticity. Authenticity, we see the word authentic, meaning real. So we want to consider the language of the test. Is it natural? A lot of times we might notice that tests have very kind of old, stuffy, highly academic language that we don't see so often, or using idioms or phrases that are not common in regular speech. That's not very authentic. Are the test items contextualized? So is there some kind of situation or context for the test items? Are the topics on the test meaningful to the test taker, or are they just asking about things that no one cares about? Is there a theme that organizes the test? And how similar are the test tasks to real world tasks? So for example, multiple choice tests are not very authentic. That is not something we do in the real world. We don't normally in the real world go around deciding A, B, C, or D. So not authentic. We can improve the authenticity of multiple choice tests. So take a moment and look at these two. If you can't see them very well, this image is also in the WhatsApp, so you can see it there as well. They're both multiple choice tests, but one is more authentic than the other. See if you can decide which one is more authentic. I'm going to switch on my light. And you can put in the chat, first or second, which one has more authenticity? And I apologize, we're going to run over about 10 minutes tonight. Okay, Lauren has jumped in with number 2. Nancy agrees. And if you want to use the annotation tool, you can circle the one. Paul and Oven agree, number 2. And yes, I also agree, number 2. Number 2 has high authenticity. If you look, it's actually a conversation. My friend and Melissa and I are going to blah, blah, blah. Do you want to go? I'd love to. Where is it going to be? It's at Ruth's house. So it is contextualized, it has a theme, it's meaningful. Whereas the first one, which has low authenticity, they're just random sentences, random questions. They're not connected to each other. That's not very authentic. In real life, we don't need to use language in such random ways. When we use language in real life, it's connected to what comes before it. And so the second one, although these are both multiple choice tests, the second one is far more authentic, has higher authenticity. Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mina. I think I love the idea of authenticity, but this brought in my mind to ask this question. I have been seeing some international language tests administered by these international organizations, and I saw like maybe if it comes especially to here, students take part or sit for these exams, and I saw it is always challenging to most students who would even want to pass them, probably because they have some reasons of going I mean, going out to study or other reasons. So I found it difficult. Seems like most of the students who pass these exams, it seems they have been having experience on accessing this, I call contextual information or called English language content related to these countries they want to go for. But I've been seeing it as a difficulty since as an English teacher, teaching high school students who doing science, but also who, you know, sometimes have grades, I mean, higher grades, but also they always find the difficulty in passing those exams. So what do you think about this? Should we call this like the test?
I didn't catch the last part. Should we call this a test?
Not the authenticity of the features of the test?
You know, there's a couple. It might, you know, it might be related a bit to authenticity. It also might be related to test reliability. Some tests are kind of discriminate against certain students. So for example, if you are taking an American test, there might be some questions that are just automatically easier to someone who understands American culture. It's not done on purpose, but the person who wrote it lives in an American culture, has designed it for American culture students. And so a student from another country, such as Kenya or Japan, they might understand the language perfectly, but because there's something cultural in it, they may become confused by something like that. And so we do see that with all these international tests, sometimes that kind of context can be a factor. And I would say that's related to test reliability. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
But yeah, it is definitely something that's being talked about, especially, you know, as the more English gets internationalized and these high stakes tests become more popular. You're definitely right. All right, our next principle, we only have a quick one after this. This is washback. And washback is if we think of the ocean and how it washes back on us. So students take the test and then the result washes back on them. So what is the effect of the test on the learners? There's also this question of how does the test affect instruction? We'll just talk about that briefly. So here's two examples. So these are two writing essays. One of them has good washback, and I accidentally already gave the answer. In both of these, the student failed. And so the student is going to feel bad. However, if we look at the second example here, it just says failed. The student doesn't know why he or she failed. The student doesn't know what they can do to improve. This first one, it does look like there's a lot of mistakes, but the mistakes have been identified. The student has a chance to look and see what the problem is, how to fix it in the future. And the teacher is asking to see the student after class. So it sounds like the teacher is going to take some time to talk to the student one-on-one about what they can do to improve. So this is one example of washback. We have another example here, two types of vocabulary tests, or two ways to assess vocabulary. If we imagine in one class, a teacher every time for vocabulary always gives a gap fill quiz. So the students have to put the vocabulary into the gaps. In another class, the teacher always tests the vocabulary in different ways. So maybe there'll be one section of gap fill, one section of sentence writing, one part where you have to paraphrase using the vocabulary. The first one has a poor effect on students. The washback is negative. If students know that they only have to learn vocabulary enough to do a gap fill, they're not going to learn the vocabulary very deeply. Same thing with matching, or if you always ask students, what's the definition for vocabulary, then they're only going to memorize the vocabulary and they're not going to learn how to use the vocabulary in sentences. The second example has high or positive washback because students know that they're going to need to be flexible with their understanding of the vocabulary. They're going to need to understand the meaning. They're also going to have to use the vocabulary in a meaningful way. Therefore, they're going to study more deeply. And I just answered the question. Okay, the last thing is transparency. So students often get a score, and sometimes they don't know why that score is their score. Transparency means there's no secrets about the scoring. Students understand how they will be assessed, so they know what kind of test to expect. They know what the criteria is to succeed. This is something we've talked about with rubrics. Rubrics are a great way of letting students know what the expectations are. I'm going to answer this myself. Transparency is important because it builds trust between the teacher and the student. It helps to keep students from getting a bad attitude when they do poorly, and it helps them to remain hardworking when they do well. When students just get a grade, they don't necessarily connect it to their effort, but if we are transparent about what the grade is and why, we can keep them motivated. Okay, this is your last thing here. I'm gonna, I wanna put you in breakout rooms, but we really don't have time. So first of all, of these factors we talked about, I have two questions. Which one is the most important? And what is the perfect test? You can answer either of these questions. Which of these factors you think is more important, or what makes the perfect test? You could answer in the chat, or we have a minute or two for people to raise their hand and share their thoughts. Oh, nice answer, Lillian. An effective test should consider all the above factors as they are equally key. Very good. Oh, bless me. Nancy says that reliability and washback, so that fairness and then that kind of effect after. Very good. There's no right answer here. I'm just curious what you all think. Rukia says all, so agreeing with Lillian. Jeffrey agrees. Oh, very good. Yeah, there may be different times when different things are important as well. It might depend on the situation. Josiah also agrees with all. I will tell you, you cannot have all of these things high at the same time. If your test is high in practicality, it's probably going to have lower authenticity, lower washback, possibly lower validity as well. Because a test that's easy to grade and easy to make probably isn't going to have some of those other factors. And so if you agree that they are all important, then you need to have a balance between them. And this can be really tricky. Sorry, I was hoping you guys would have a chance to go into breakout rooms and discuss this in more detail, because I do think it's an interesting thing. Leonard's for practicality, reliability, and transparency. Very good. Many teachers definitely choose practicality because we're human beings and we can't spend hours and hours making tests, giving tests, and grading tests. So these are the references I used for this. And when I send this in the chat, this yellow one is a link to the PDF of the book by Brown, which is, I think, is really nice, useful book. Thanks very much for being here tonight. Special thanks to Lillian for that great presentation to start us off. We'll be exploring assessment further, and on Thursday, we'll be looking at formative assessment. And also those of you who are joining us on Friday for the EMCG Friday conversation, we'll be talking about current events. This is the Zoom link, so you'll be able to find this in this PowerPoint, but I will also remind you probably on Thursday and share that Zoom link with the group. So anybody who wants to join that. And then I'm going to turn this over to Rukia Mohammed. She has some words for us. Go ahead, Rukia.
Thank you, Mina. Sorry, my video is not on.
No problem.
I'll be very brief. Last 2 weeks, we talked about English conversation clubs, and we sent out Google link for people to register for the ones who are interested to join the school's English clubs. So I'm happy that we got a very overwhelming response, and we are going to be opening a WhatsApp group for the school's English club, and we will give you further information while in that group. If anyone here did not give their number in the form, kindly send your number to Austin. He shared his number on the chat. Thank you.
Oh, great.
Okay. Yeah. Min, I also wanted to add just one more thing. Yes, I just wanted to tell the people here that we have the TESOL conference, which was last week. Yeah, and everything went well. Now, I just want to point out that if you attended the conference, the videos are still on. I think they'll be there for like a month. So because I know there are a lot of classes that were shared there, so you can just go through the link and your platform that you created for you to access the virtual conference, and you can access the videos, but the videos are very, very amazing. Then for those who we recommended but did not receive any communication, we are still following up with the embassy here in Nairobi, so we'll be able to find out probably what could have happened. So just be patient with us. So thank you. Over to you, Mina.
Thanks for that reminder. Actually, I'd forgotten that the videos are up for watching too, because I wasn't able to. So maybe I can access them. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. I hope to see you Thursday at our session. Then I hope to see you on Friday at the Conversation Club. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, I encourage you to get in touch with Rukia about starting conversation clubs at your schools, because we'll be meeting to do monthly things and have competitions and things like that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, Tomas. Thank you all. Thanks for staying a little late tonight too. I apologize. I will strive to be on time on Thursday, finishing everything up. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye.